Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Legendarium podcast. I am Craig, your host, and over there we've got Ryan and Kyle. Kyle is playing the White Fresh Prince today with his pink hat, and Ryan is playing Poirot.
Yes, of course. Hopefully, people who are watching this on YouTube.
Oh man! So this is one of those times when I
can do this whole episode if you want.
You literally cannot, because I will shut off your mic. I'll shut off your mic and then my mic, and then I'll murder you. So there's no evidence.
And then I would have solved how it was done.
Right. So this is one of those times when, if you're an audio-only listener, that's great. We value your presence. Obviously, this is a podcast first and foremost, but I do highly encourage you to get on YouTube and look at Ryan's mustache, because he is in fact playing Poirot in a play. And so he has the whole twirly mustache and everything. It's disgusting.
It takes time to train it. You got to get the hair to do what it's supposed to do. Yeah, there you go. Okay, Ryan, stare at the camera.
Can you twiddle it for us?
Give us a little twirl. Okay, yeah, that was for the YouTube people. Sorry, podcast people. Today we are talking about the Black Cauldron. This is the second book in the Prydain Chronicles. This is the first award-winning book in the Prydain Chronicles, and we're going to talk about why that is in just a moment. But first, I'll just remind everybody, go to thelegendarium.com for full show notes. And, well, no, we don't really put full show notes there. I should say for full archives of the show. You can find things by author. You can find the archive. You can find the Discord link. You can find the Patreon link. All this stuff is there at thelegendarium.com. And we would appreciate you stopping by. So, the Black Cauldron. I was going to insult you guys with like Black Cauldron insults. I think Ryan, yours was probably going to be, I threw him in the Black Cauldron, but then it didn't break. Paul Hollywood just came out and said, "Nah, it's a bad bake." Yeah. I couldn't come up with one for Kyle. So
it's okay. Your jokes have killed my soul enough that I'm already a cauldron born.
It's numb and dead, and yeah. So the Black Cauldron. Like I said, book 2. This one, as I was saying to the guys earlier before we started recording, I found it shocking just how much better it is than the first book. And I love the first book. I think it's charming and sweet and wonderful, but this one really, really kicks it up a notch in the quality department as far as the storytelling, and we're going to get to why. So, a recap, an unprepared recap is in order. Taryn finds himself on another adventure. This time he goes off with Eilonwy, Gurgi, Gwydion. All the usual suspects are on this journey, but we add a couple into the mix. We've got Adeon, he's basically like Dalben and Gwydion, put together. Yeah. Right. He's the warrior bard, basically. Very wise, right? And then the hot-headed, what's his name? Illyrian? Ellidyr. Yeah, there you go. I'm thinking, gosh, I'm back in Middle Earth. Yeah. Or whatever. Ellidyr? Yeah. Ellidyr. He's the hothead. He's the youngest son in a royal family, and he's been relegated to second place his whole life, and he is sick and tired of it, and he's not going to let some assistant pigkeeper take all of his glory. So these are the folks that they head out on the adventure with. By the way, spoilers abound. Okay, yes, we're going to spoil this story. They are heading out to destroy the Black Cauldron. This is Aran Deathlord's magical cauldron that he uses to create the Cauldronborn, the deathless warriors that cannot be killed. And so, they can't let this stay in his hands, and so the mission is to destroy it. And the mission does not go well. In fact, the Black Cauldron isn't even there anymore when they break into Aran's stronghold, and so Taryn finds himself on a quest to find the Black Cauldron. He picks up a few breadcrumbs on the trail, and it takes him to the marshes of Morva with his companions. On the way there, Adeon is killed, and Taryn inherits his magical brooch and his horse, etc. Ellidyr rides off, trying to gain glory on his own. But the regular companions end up in the marshes of Morva, where they meet Ordu, Orwen, and Orgok. And they're the 3 witches that live in the marsh, and they're in possession of the Black Cauldron. The companions get it back at great cost, and are trying to cart it all the way to Cardal Ben, which is not working out very well. It is stolen by Ellidyr, and eventually he repents of his wrongdoing, gives his life to destroy the cauldron, and the day is saved. So How's that?
That's good.
About right?
Yeah. That's good.
Good.
Well done.
So, we're going to get to some Discord comments in just a moment, but I should say last week I got a funny comment yesterday from somebody on Discord who said, you shouldn't have started with the Discord comments. I want to hear what you guys have to say about the story. And I was like, well, but the questions were so perfect. Mm-hmm. They just let us right through what we already had to say on the subject anyway. But today, we'll start with our own thoughts, and then we'll go kick it to Discord. So, I've been monologuing for long enough now. Kyle, I already said I thought that there's a huge jump in quality here. What do you think? This one versus book one. How did it go?
Yeah, I mean, I think quality and pace was a lot better in this one. There's a lot packed into this book. There's a lot of little quests and character building and depth to this book. I think that the last one, I think it was there, but it wasn't nearly at this level. So I mean, we talked about this last time, but digging into Elanwee's character a little bit more, you get a little bit more of her personality and digging into that. I really enjoyed the back and forth between Ellidyr and Taryn. I think that was a very important character growth interaction throughout the book for Taryn to learn, and Ellidyr by the end, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is one of those cases where it's like, this is book 2, so he's been published and he's taking more time on it, or his editor is jumping in and helping out more. I'm not familiar with the background of the publishing and how that all went. But it was a surprising and welcome uptick in quality, drama, and character depth, I think.
Yeah. Ryan, agree, disagree? Other thoughts?
I agree. Part of it, though, I think is I feel like some of it is that the actions that Taryn is taking is intentional in this one versus in the prior book. It's a little more just reactionary to, I've got to go find Henwen, I got to figure out, and the world's kind of happening around him.
Right.
So now we're getting to have a little bit more, we feel like there's a little more depth because there's more decisions being made versus just reactions.
Things happening. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's part of the reason why I feel like it paces better. It's a little more engaging, and you can feel a little bit more connected to Taryn and some of the other people as they go through. And they have grown. You don't lose what they picked up in book 1. There's no reset button on these characters. They have all what they learned in book of 3. They're still showcasing in this one. So it's a good feeling to see the characters continue to grow.
Yeah, I like that, especially with Taryn, who he's, as you say, he's reactionary in book 1 largely, and he's an idiot. Mm-hmm. Like he has, sorry, I'm kind of coughing a little bit here. He has his moments, but for the most part, it's like he accidentally succeeds in book 1, right? And in this one, it's not like he magically became ultra competent from book 1 to book 2, but he did get a little bit more competent, and certainly a little more confident. And so I like that it's a small progression, where I think is that what you were saying? Like, these are still recognizable characters that we met. It's not like they're completely different. They got one rung up on the ladder, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you look at it specifically in regards to Taryn, but all of them do it to a certain extent, you watch them make decisions and realize that they have to approach it differently than they would have before. Taryn often will say he gets to the point where he's like, this is what Gwydion would do. This is what, and he's kind of thinking through that. And now that he's been through an adventure with Gwydion, he knows that he's able to be more accurate in assessing that versus just being an adventure hungry person. This time it's less about, I want to go on an adventure and I want to be a hero, and it's more about my honor. I'm more, I know what it's like to be on an adventure. It's not all it's cracked up to be, but I still want the glory and the honor. And now he's learning what the cost of having that is. And that's the progression, the natural progression that he has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love his, as you say, his interactions with Ellidyr, and especially when you have Edaon in the mix still at the beginning of the book, where he's kind of playing referee between these two. Yeah. And they're both Taryn and Ellidyr are scoring points off of each other, where Taryn is like, your pride will ruin us all. You're just seeking after your glory and honor, like you say. And then Ellidyr is like, yeah, you're making fun of me for it, but that's all you care about.
Hello, pot.
Yeah, exactly.
Meat kettle.
And cauldron.
Nicely done. Or Kraken.
Kraken.
So they're both scoring points off each other, and then Adaon comes in and says, "Hey, by the way, you're both being idiots. Please sit down and shut up." And like in a much more wisdomous way than that. But I think Adaon is a great character in that essentially we come to learn that much of his wisdom probably comes from his brooch. Okay, so let's explain the brooch. Okay, so he will die about a third of the way through the story and gift Taran his brooch. So Taran puts it on, and it essentially gives Taran these dreams. He is now dreaming the kind of things that Adaon was dreaming, images and understandings about other people. And even when he's awake, it helps him see the world a little bit differently. He can sense smells and colors and understand weather patterns more. It just basically makes him a little more superhuman, right?
Yep.
And I enjoyed both Adaon and the brooch. Kind of there, we take them together. In one case, it's Taran having somebody else teach him these things, and then in another case, it's him taking it on himself and learning it for himself. Because it really struck me as like that is what it means to get older. If you do it right, and if you have somebody to guide you, then you can get older and become more jaded and cynical and whatnot, or you can find more joy and wonder in the world and deeper understanding of what other people are going through. More sympathy for those around you. These things that the brooch and that Adaon himself teaches Taran felt very, very familiar to generally growing up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you guys have anything else to say on the brooch or on Adaon?
Not necessarily. I did want to go back really quick to the jump in quality. I don't know if either of you read the author's note at the very beginning?
Yeah.
So he basically said that that was kind of his intention, is to not only answer what's next in the story, but also to kind of elevate it. And I think he said they're intended to hopefully do somewhat more than continue the Chronicles of Prydain. What happens next is always an urgent question. And this volume attempts to answer that. And then he says, basically he's going to flesh out the story a little bit more. But if a darker thread runs through, it's because the happenings here are more serious. And then what I really liked that he called out here is the choices and decisions that face a frequently baffled assistant pigkeeper are no easier than the ones we ourselves must make. Even in a fantasy realm, growing up is accomplished not without cost. And so I think he was saying, like, I want to continue the story, but this story also stands alone, and this story is kind of the next stage of life and trying to reflect real life and real life choices and challenges. So
yeah,
that's an interesting thing to think about from the perspective of this being written as a children's fantasy. Most fantasy that we read, most things, it's already at a specific level. It says, it's young adult, it's adult, whatever, it's a full novel. But to write something that can scale up with your audience as they read, force them to ask a little bit more versus it all being the exact same, that takes some guts to do as an author, rather than just say, I'm always going to write, I'm sure they're great, Dave Pilkey, but the, Captain Underpants stories are, you're never pushing your audience to go to the next level with something like that. Whereas here, I'm going to take them a little darker, a little deeper, make them work a little more, and see if that helps them improve as readers.
Yeah. Well, gosh, yeah, absolutely. And this book is darker, which is an interesting thing to say because we commented that on book 1, where there were some things in this, burning people alive, chopping off heads, and like there's some dark stuff that happens in book 1. And in this one, I don't know that you get quite as much of that overt, dark stuff, but still, I think we've already talked about Taran versus Eladir. Am I getting the name right?
Yeah.
Taran versus Eladir, where that hits so close to actual growing up experience and what it means, where that actually, in a way, emotionally, spiritually, is dark on a level that we never got anywhere close to in book 1, where it's like, what kind of person are you going to be? which seeking after glory and honor might not be such a bad thing. Like, are you doing it for the right reasons? Are you going about it in the right way? Are you seeking glory and honor for its own sake? Or do you understand that like certain actions will bring you glory and honor? And so that's what you pursue, like there are different questions around this that you can ask yourself. And so it feels weird, I guess, for me to say that's dark, but
Sure.
Does that make any sense? I feel like it is.
Yeah. And I think even beyond just dark, there's also real stakes. So Adaon dies. Ellidyr has to sacrifice himself in the end. And for a children's story, like a lot of the times you don't see that finality. I think we were even joking about the adaptation. And Ryan, you're more the resident expert on the cartoon Disney adaptation of this, which is not really representative.
Narrator, he meant adaptation.
Adaptation. Yes, that's what I meant.
Hey, you said wisdomous earlier, and I didn't call it out. So.
Wisdomous.
That was on purpose, though. So.
But the idea that like they'll change characters, and then I think in the movie version, Gurgi dies and he comes back to life inexplicably. There is no stakes. But in this, it might feel darker, but maybe darker isn't exactly the right way to explain it. It's heavier. It's more final. There's heavier stakes for a child reader or an adolescent reader to understand. People die in real life. Your choices matter.
There are two different aspects of the way that it's approached in this book in terms of the darkness. That is,
do you believe in a thing called love?
Just listen to the rhythm of your heart.
Sorry. Okay. Two different aspects. Go on.
In the first book, you have your good guys and your bad guys. Okay, clear, cut and dry, black and white. Good guys, bad guys. In this one, and you saw dark actions. In this one, we address dark intention and darkness within people. So it brings it in, more interior the first time, and you put the people who are on the good guys have that. So that's one of the new elements that why this one might have that darker feel to it is simply because we've now introduced the idea of the evil in men's hearts in this, where in the first one did not exist. It was the Horn King, the bad guys, and the good guys. Totally separate. It's just nuance. It's nuance.
Yeah, okay. So what you're getting at is Taran may be the hero, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have his own demons to deal with. And certainly that can be said for Ellidyr, where it's like, he's here to do the right thing. He is here on this quest to retrieve the Black Cauldron. He's doing the right thing, but he's doing it poorly.
The same thing with King Morgaunt at the end, where he's like, no, I'm going to make my own Cauldron-born army, and I'm going to, this is what I'm going to do. And he's one of the great kings who have defended Prydain, and so, to turn him evil, it's very clearly made out at the beginning that he's a little bit colder, and
it's fairly telegraphed.
We're signaled, we're telegraphed that it's probably going to happen. But for a kid, so even the good guys can go bad, which I think it's a big step.
Yeah. Okay. Well, further thoughts as we move through the story. Anything else that you guys have in your notes? So I've got some of my own. No? Okay. It's my turn then. Let's talk about the language in the book, the writing style. So in fact, I'm going to pull up a specific page just because it's where I wrote it down. So in my little paperback, it's page 148, chapter 17. Anyway, it struck me finally as I'm closing in on the end of the book. Ellidyr says, "What is the honor of a pig boy compared to the honor of a prince? I have paid for my honor," answered Taran, "more dearly than you would pay for yours. Do you ask me now to cast it away? You, pig boy, dared reproach me for seeking glory, yet you cling to it yourself with your dirty hands. I shall not tarry here. My terms or nothing. Make your choice." Okay, my point in reading this is just to pull out things like, I shall not tarry here. Phrases like that, sentences like that, where, look, this was written in the 60s. This is not a guy who lived 300 years ago or whatever. He's deliberately using slightly archaic words, especially in the dialogue, right? He doesn't really do it in the narration, but he does do it with the dialogue. And I really liked that. I could see how it would rub some people the wrong way if they really prefer that everything have a modern feel. But for me, it gives the characters a bit of timelessness, and it gives a kid reading it a little bit of practice with language like this, where it's just... I think we talked about this on the last episode where, he trots right up to whatever line and then stays on this or that side of it, where he trots right up to the line of, boy, these people talk really archaically. He gets right up to that line and just stays barely on this side of it, where a 9-year-old or an 11-year-old or whoever's reading this can go, oh, no, I understand what's happening here. And now I just need to learn a couple of new words. Oh, shall is the same as will? Yeah, more or less. Yeah, sure.
And he does it in a way where you can understand that via context clues. So they don't have to pull out a dictionary and understand what that word means each time.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really well done. I think a modern author that does that really well is Brandon Mull, if you've read anything that he does. Fablehaven and a few other series, but he pushes the limits of vocabulary for kids. In the same way, but I like the idea that there's exposure to, like you said, maybe more archaic language or just broadening readers' understanding of how people speak and communicate.
It's also a really good piece for the character itself. We meet a lot of different of the nationalities of Prydain in this one as they all come together to their own little mini council of Dalben, and you hear the way they speak. You hear the way that Smoit speaks, and he's this
big gregarious guy.
Yeah, you hear it, and you almost hear the Scottish accent coming through, and that sort of thing. But then you kind of look at Ellidyr, and you get to know his story of being the youngest of in this kingdom, everything, and his sense of trying to overcompensate and accomplish something for honor, or whatever. And the idea that I must speak high-mindedly, I must speak this way,
right,
so that people will take me seriously.
I am a noble, and I have to speak with nobility.
Yes, I have to do that. So it, on top of being a really good way to introduce kids to a little more archaic language, it does feed a character purpose, which is why I think it works so well.
That's interesting you bring that up, because contrast that with Eilonwy, who is a princess. But she seems to be, we don't know at this point much about her background. Okay, daughter of Angarad, whatever that means. We don't have any context. We just know that she is a real-life princess. But compared to Ellidyr, she is very secure in that. And so she never does what you're talking about. Her language is extremely, almost excruciatingly straightforward and modern. You idiot assistant pigkeeper, stop being a blockhead and, whatever. Whereas Taran and Ellidyr are both insecure in their station, and so they feel like they have to adopt a little higher register for their speech. Okay, so that's interesting. That's one way to look at it. The other way, or another way that you could look at it is just we've kind of been talking about it like, oh, Taran, just be more okay with your station in life and stop striving so hard. You try hard. But on the other hand, it's like, no, why not strive a little bit? Why not reach a little bit and try to better yourself in whatever way you see that?
Regional pig keeper.
Assistant to the regional pig keeper.
Yeah.
But does that make sense? So you could make fun of him for that, or you could say, oh, maybe it's not so bad to reach a little bit.
Yeah, I think that specific point is addressed anytime he speaks with Gwydion, because based on his responses to him when things happen, especially early as they're heading out on the quest, Gwydion has expectations of him and has his own idea of who Taran is and could be. And so I think it's one of the early moments, Ellidyr and he kind of get into this jockeying race on their horses, who should be in front, and it ends up knocking him off the path and causing a bunch of noise. And Ellidyr basically comes back and says, I would send you both back if I could. I can't.
Or you mean Gwydion?
Or Gwydion comes back and says, I'd send you both back if I can. I expected better of you, Taran, like this. And Ellidyr, there's a couple different times where that happens in their frustrations. And so anytime that Taran is looking to grow, I feel like that we get Gwydion trying to help him do it in the right way. And that's, this is really the journey for him. And I feel that one of the big points in the book is that becoming a man, for Terran, coming of age here, becoming a man, that there is so much to it, and so much that you should not try and rush this and understand the nuance of what you're getting into. I think it's right there. Actually, it's like the third from last page or something. Let's see.
This is the best. This is the best part of all radio and podcast
When
shows.
we go looking for something.
Yeah, exactly.
Hold. We need some sort of like Legendarium hold music.
Oh, we do. I've got the
Elevator.
elevator music I use every once in a while.
Yeah.
I'm not taking notes here though, so I'm not
Well,
going to remember
we're
where I
on
go
YouTube,
insert it.
so you can just like pantomime something for the audience.
There's the
if you'd
reason
like.
that they invented that 15-second and 30-second skip.
I feel like
ahead
it
button.
should be a requirement as Ryan's looking through that he sits there and twiddles his
Mustache. Yeah, absolutely.
like, yes, I can find this.
Such a villain. Did you find it?
Yes. No, I know I had it just a minute ago.
I don't even remember what we were talking about. Do you, Kyle?
No.
Yeah, I'm out. It's a nice hat, man.
Hey, thanks.
Okay,
Sweet.
no
Yeah.
problem.
Fine, I will bring it. We'll move on, and
You
I'll
keep going.
Okay.
I wanted to bring up a topic.
All right, go for it.
Magical objects.
Mm.
Because there are a few
Okay.
in this book. Or in
You've
this
got
story.
the cauldron, the brooch.
You got the cauldron, the brooch, and I think the witches talk about like they've got a few different things. But I thought it was interesting that I liked your call out earlier about the brooch itself is what allows the wearer to kind of have this dream power or whatever. But there was a call out earlier in the book where I think Terran gets a sword. And he says, "What powers does it have?"
Right.
And he's like expecting the sword itself to have powers.
Because it's Dalben's sword.
It's a sword. And I really liked was it Aedeon or
Aedeon.
Aedeon, whoever said it to him. Like, this sword is just a hunk of metal, and it's actually an ugly hunk of metal at that. The only power that this sword has is what comes from the wielder.
Right. I think
And
it was Dalben that said that.
Yeah, and I marked that down in my notes as I really liked that call out, because I think especially in fantasy and as we get accustomed and know fantasy tropes, there's always a magical object. But the call out that it's not about the magic in the thing, it's about the power in the person.
So
Was
absolutely. And this we talk about this every so often with a lot of magical objects, and it generally makes for a really good story. So the One Ring is a great example of this. The Sword of Shannara is a great example of this, where when you have a magical item, it's in the best cases, it usually turns out to be a psychic amplifier of some kind. So whatever is latent within you, this object brings out. So the Sword of Shannara makes you address the truth inside of yourself. The One Ring, obviously, it's brings out these malignant, evil tendencies within you, whatever. And these are the same way where it's like, okay, the cauldron, not so much. That's a pretty straightforward magic object. But the brooch, if you were to give Aedeon's brooch to Ellidyr, how would it affect him? What would it amplify within him? So within Terran, we see the stuff that you can guess at or sometimes see explicitly in his character throughout these two books being brought to the fore by the brooch. Being more understanding, more sympathetic, and more observant, where these things were there, but the brooch brings them out. So yeah, I think it fits really nicely within that pantheon of magical objects. So, all right, Ryan, did you find it?
I did, and it actually ties into what we're talking about here. It brings it together.
Oh,
man, look at that magic.
It's 177 here.
Ryan, you're my magical object.
Please don't say things like that. So Terran is speaking to Gwydion here at the end, and he says, "It is strange," he said at last. "I had longed to enter the world of men. Now I see it filled with sorrow, with cruelty and treachery, and with those who would destroy all around them. Yet enter it you must," Gwydion answered, "for it is a destiny laid on each of us. True, you have seen these things, but there are equal parts of love and joy. Think of Aedeon and believe this. Think too of your companions. Out of friendship for you, they would have given up all they valued, indeed all they possessed." Terran nodded. "I see now the price I paid was the least of all, for the brooch was never really mine. I wore it, but it was not part of me. I am thankful I kept it as long as I did. At least I knew for a little while how a bard must feel and what it must be like to be a hero." "That is why your sacrifice was all the more difficult," Gwydion said. "You chose to be a hero not through enchantment, but through your own manhood. And since you have chosen, for good or ill, you must take the risks of a man. You may win or you may lose. Time will decide."
Hmm. And then you shut up? Is that okay? Are we supposed to talk now?
Well, I was saying that portion, it kind of connected with the original point we were making about coming in, being a man, and making that choice. And then the enchantment where even Gwydion says at the very end, you chose to be a hero through who you were, not because you had anything magical or anything like that.
Yeah.
It wraps the whole piece together. So
Absolutely. No, I'm with you on that. Okay, cool. So, can we go? I know we're jumping around here a little bit. We're not like following the story.
now you
or
wish we
anything.
went to the Discord questions, didn't you? Don't you?
Yeah, exactly. Right. No, can we talk about the marshes of Morva?
Yeah.
And the three fates.
So we have Ordu, Orwen, and Orgok. What'd you guys think of that passage? And while you're thinking about your answer, I will just say it had been years and years and years since I'd read this book or any of these books. And when somebody says, have you ever read The Black Cauldron? That's the only thing that pops into my mind. All that I can remember is the Marshes of Morva scene or scenes with the three witches or enchantresses or whatever they're called, right? And so I for now, I'm just going to leave it at that. It's a very memorable, visually interesting, rhetorically interesting scene to me. What do you guys think of it?
I really like the Marshes of Morva. Obviously, the three witches, enchantresses, whatever you want to call them, they are another one of these elements that is a little more nuanced because they're against, they're antagonists to our little crew here. So you're like, oh, they're bad guys, but they're not really.
Right.
They even say as they're trying to bargain with Terran over the crockpot of doom, they're like, we are only concerned with things as they are.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so this is a really unique perspective, especially if you kind of use them as stand-ins for the Greek mythology, the Fates, who saw the future. These ones are a little bit different as they are only worried about the present, whereas the Fates had past, present, and future all included. Yeah. It's like, okay, all three of these, they're focused on just the one. Or are they? Because they're kind of tricksy little devils too.
They are. I think because of that, what you're talking about, they seem more like nature. They're like a personification of impersonal forces. So, whether that's the natural order or time or what have you, they don't care what should be. They only care about what is. Mm-hmm. And so they're telling the story about how they went and got the cauldron back, and they're like, well, it was ours. We sold it, or we lent it, or whatever. We rented it to Aran Deathlord, and then he broke the terms of his contract. He broke the terms of the contract, so we took it back, and that's it. That where there's not some question of like, well, yeah, he was making a lot of cauldron-born, and it was upsetting the balance. No, they don't care. Mm-hmm. He broke the contract, so we went and got it back. And it's I guess in that way an interesting episode where Terran gets to face impersonal forces that are neither good nor evil. They just are.
And in a similar way, don't they call out that Dalben had spent time with them, right? At some point.
Yeah. And he grew up with them.
He grew up with them, and then they kicked him out because he was learning too much, or he was too curious, or whatever. He
drank a potion that made him as intelligent or as wisdomous, as Ryan likes to say, as they are.
And so they were like, nope. Which is interesting, given your point you just made around like they're just worried about the present, or they're just the representation of natural forces. What would be the reasoning for not allowing Dalben to be as wisdomous as the Fates?
Yeah,
so, is there a threat there? Is there something like this isn't how it should be, so we've got to get rid of him? Is there an underlying reason behind that other than
I don't know?
This is not good for our present, so get out of here. This
is a great example, I think, of where like, look, these are kids' books, sure, and it's not like a super tight mythology, and so think there are going to be little cracks in things like that. But I guess. Oh, sorry, Kyle. It looked like you were going to say something.
I was just going to say. I mean, we don't have to dig too far into it, but it's what came out for me in that scene with the three enchantresses was that bit of world building and background history around Dalben and this is where he grew up. This is how he got the Book of Three. This is which he uses in his own way or whatever to be wise and make choices. And we're still trying to answer that question. What is the Book of Three? Well, now we have at least the origin of it.
Right.
It could be the Book of Three, the three of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it is a plot point, but it's also, I think, we've been talking already about this being a coming of age story. You know, Taryn is growing up, and what does that mean? And this is, to my recollection, this is the first time he's ever come up on such an impersonal force as these enchantresses, and that is also part of growing up, where you have to reckon with this idea that the universe, doesn't care.
It owes you nothing.
Nature, yeah, exactly. Nature owes you nothing. So you could become a billionaire like Lord Bezos, or you could die in a car crash this afternoon. Like the universe doesn't care. Time doesn't care. Nature doesn't care. These things just are. And so I think that's a significant part of growing up, and that's what one of the things this passage does for me is shows Taryn coming up against those things and having to reckon with that, at least in some small way. What struck me on this read through is how short this passage was, where this is the entire book in my memory, and it's like, it's 2 or 3 chapters.
And I think to build off of that point, the universe doesn't care, but if you care and you want to influence that based off of whatever your moral compass is, it requires sacrifice on your end, because in order for them to actually get the cauldron, the 3 fates or witches or whatever said that they had to give them something of equivalent value. And what does Taryn end up doing? He ends up giving them the brooch, right?
Mm-hmm.
To trade for the cauldron, which means if he wants to exert his influence and continue on with his quest because he thinks that is what needs to be done and change or manipulate the universe to his will, whatever that means, it requires sacrifice on his part.
There you go. All right. Should we move on to another point? Okay. Oh, first of all, I'm sorry. Before we go on to the last big thing I wanted to bring up, brooch. I was remarking on this yesterday as I was finishing up the book. I was talking to my wife about it. And I'm sorry, this is a dumb little point, and feel free to skip ahead because it's nothing. But maybe this happens to other people too. I read this book a ton when I was a kid, or these books, I suppose. But yeah, I read this book a ton when I was a kid, 9 years old or so, give or take. And when I was a kid, I read B-R-O-O-C-H.
Brooch.
Brooch. You already said it once, and you corrected yourself, right? Brooch, right? That's certainly is what it looks like, and so that's what I read it as a kid. And then as an adult, I learned, okay, so the word is brooch. Okay, fine, it's brooch. All right, I guess we're going Old English here.
Don't even get me started on victuals.
Or breeches.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, we have these weird words, but even in my head, it's not like I'm reading this out loud or anything. In my head, as I'm reading this book, as a 35-year-old man, my head is going brooch, brooch, brooch. It just reverts instantly to my 9-year-old self, and it was so frustrating.
That's how my mind works with a lot of names in fantasy books. Like what I originally read it as on the page for our Wheel of Time characters' names. Yeah, it's going to be that. It's never going to be Birgitta. It's going to be Bridget, because that's how I read it as a 13-year-old when I was reading it the first time. Right. Even though it does not make sense if you read it.
Yeah, I know this is wrong. Don't care. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the actual point I wanted to bring up, it comes very, very early in the book. Okay, so they're meeting, what'd you call it? The Council of Elrond? Council of Dalben?
Council of Dalben, yeah.
They're at the Council of Dalben. Let's see, Adaon Adaon is the son of the world's greatest bard, or like the head bard or something. I don't know, whatever he's called. And he's talking to Fluter, who was gifted a harp by Adaon's father. And the harp that, breaks every time he lies, or the strings break whenever Fluter lies. And he says, so Adaon says, my father sends greetings and asks how you fare with the harp he gave you. I can see it wants a repair, he added with a friendly laugh. Yes, admitted Fluter, I do have trouble with it now and again. I can't help adding a little color to the facts. Most facts need it so badly. But every time I do, this is the result. Be of good cheer, said Adeon, laughing wholeheartedly. Your gallant tales are worth all the harp strings in Prydain. Okay. I was curious what you guys think of this sentiment. What is where's the balance? What's the value? How do we balance truth versus what? Heroism? I don't know quite what to balance it against. What's the word we're looking for? Is the truth more important than a good story? You know, this passage comes down very clearly and says, no, it's worth a few embellishments to get a good story.
I would say if you want to draw real life pieces on this, he's a bard. That is part of who he is and what he is supposed to be and what he does. So yeah, in his context, it makes sense. Does that mean that everybody should embellish every story and the fish should be, 28 inches long and like? No, but if you're in the business of storytelling, it probably doesn't hurt to put a little added color in here and there.
And I think it depends on what the moral of those stories are. What is the takeaway? So is there something positive or something to inform or educate the audience? If it is, and you embellish that a little bit so that point gets driven home a little bit more, it's exactly what we're reading right now, right? There's a lot of commentary on just human nature, right, and the way that people act and should act or not act, and the embellishment, if that helps drive that point home, I think that's maybe what he's getting at.
Yeah. I don't know where I draw the line. Because I do value truth very highly. Mm-hmm. In fact, this is one of the things that drives me the very most crazy about Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. I guess if you haven't seen this decade and a half old trilogy, then skip 60 seconds or whatever. But at the end of the second movie, The Dark Knight, Harvey Dent turns evil, but then they cover it up, right? And they tell the public that he was such a great man. And they embellish his story to keep the heroic narrative, to give people a hero, to give them something to strive toward, which I think is valuable. But it turns around and bites them in the ass in the third movie, and society almost breaks down because of the lie that they told, because that opened the door for somebody to do something awful. Bane is able to manipulate the public in part because he's able to expose the lie of Harvey Dent. And then at the end of the third movie, they'll lie about Batman and his sacrifice, where they do the exact same thing, and it's presented as this like, oh, it's a wonderful happy ending. He survived and he saved the day, but they set him up as a story in the same way they did Harvey Dent. Anyway, sorry, that is a tangent. Luckily we're famous for those. But my point just being, I can see the value in having the heroic story, something to strive toward, something to set your sights on, a North Star of some kind. But is it worth the truth? Is it worth sacrificing the truth? I don't know. So anyway,
so not worth the harp strings is what
it's
you're
not.
saying.
Yeah, it's not worth all the harp strings in Prydain, probably.
Craig's over here singing "Unbreak My Harp." Unbreak my harp.
I wasn't. For anybody wondering, I was not over here singing that.
Your hair is long and luscious and flowing. It just all goes together.
That's our next investment, is a soft wind tunnel fan that can just blow Craig's hair on the video for
Nicolas
us.
Cage style.
Oh, dude.
Yep, Con Air.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we need these things. Okay.
Support us on Patreon so we can buy Craig a hair fan.
Do you guys have anything else to bring up before we get to any complaints with the book, if you have any?
Just a quick, very quick mention of Gwistle.
The non-dwarf of the fair folk.
Yeah, we get to realize that there's a greater expanse of the fair folk than just the dwarven or the fairy. Like, that's kind of the way that it feels the first time, is that's just what they are. Now we have our Ent stand-in, for lack of a better term, who's very depressed.
Wait, what? An Ent stand-in?
Yeah. He's a tree, basically.
Is he?
I thought so.
I thought he was just like a thin dude. But I don't know. I'd have to go back and read that.
Well, we'll go back and go through that section.
Yeah, Ryan's going to hunt through the book
Mustache music, please. Mustache twiddling music.
No,
as
it's
Ryan
fine. It's
finds
fine.
it.
I'll take your word for it. Okay, fine. He's an ant stand-in. Ryan, don't. Just leave it.
Okay. That's fine. But, yeah, I visualize him as a Treebeard-esque type character.
Okay, all right.
But, on a lot smaller scale, like baby Treebeard.
Like Twigbeard.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
But he's also, it's been really interesting that the fair folk characters that we follow are the grumpy ones, and the rest of them stay behind in the kingdom. Because we get Dolly, who's always frustrated and grumpy, and
Idleegg.
King Idleegg is his own thing, and then everyone else is happy fairyland, it seems like. And then Gwistle's like, nothing matters. This life sucks. Don't worry about it.
You guys have kids.
The
Have you
nihilist.
ever on Netflix? Have you ever seen a show called True and the Magic Kingdom? There's a gloomy Gus character. His name is literally Gloomy Gus, and he talks like this. And I hate joy. And that's who I picture when I think of Gwistle. Is well, okay, but nothing matters. So yeah, I like Gloomy Gus for this guy. Anyway, sorry. What about Gwistle?
He looked like a bundle of sticks with cobwebs floating at the top.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Fine. Sure.
Take that. That's as far as I'm taking it. He's grumpy. He was an interesting character. We visited the Fairfolk twice now, and both times come out with a grumpy character.
Yeah. Okay.
So
something to watch for in the future.
Extreme depth of point.
Kyle, anything else?
No. I
Okay.
think we're good.
So I wanted to bring up just one very, very minor complaint in this book. And it's something that I only bring this up as a point to anybody else out there who's writing a book. It's just one of those little things to watch out for. Okay, this book is called The Black Cauldron. When they go on their quest, they are looking for the Black Cauldron. They find the room where the Black Cauldron is supposed to be. The Black Cauldron is gone. The Black Cauldron has, made its way toward the marshes of Morva. So we go to the marshes of Morva. We find the Black Cauldron, which the witches start calling the Black
Crockpot.
Crocken. Okay,
Yeah.
which I looked up. It's just the Welsh word for cauldron. That's it. It's not more complicated than that. But so they call it the Croken or Crocken, whatever.
Release the Crocken.
Release the Croken, sure.
Someone had to get it out at least once.
That's what. No.
Release
Okay,
it.
all right. Anyway, that's all fine. I don't have a problem with them saying, actually, its name is the Black Croken. Okay, fine. But then as the story goes on, the words start to get used interchangeably, which is okay. Again, this is okay for the characters who, like Taryn and Eilonwy, who met with the sorceresses, whatever, witches. We're going with witches.
The Sorcerai.
The orgs.
Yeah, there you go. It's fine for them because they've got both words. But then when they meet up with everybody else, like Gwydion is calling it the Croken. What's his name? Ellidyr is calling it the Croken. And I went back and looked it up, and I was like, wait, is this right? Yeah, they are. But these people have never met the witches. They've never, presumably, never heard the real word. And we know this because at the beginning of the story, Gwydion's calling it the Black Cauldron. It's the cauldron. And it's just one of those little things. It's a little slip up. I know this is horribly minor, but it did take me out a little bit. And I was like, come on, pay a little bit of attention to which characters know the words. I don't know.
Crokenborn just doesn't have quite the same ring to it as...
Okay, well, anyway, so that's the end of our discussion, I guess. You guys, you good? Any final thoughts? Let me ask you this for a final thought, Kyle. Are you intrigued any more after book 2 than you were after book 1
yeah.
to go on with the story?
No, absolutely. Like I said, I think there was a noted elevation in depth, and I like that. I guess maybe my one thing we can add is I feel like the world building in this is really well done through the dialogue, and there's not like, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of super deliberate world building, which is not probably the case, because I think there's a lot of very deliberate things done here.
Yeah.
It feels very natural, and I love the idea that we've got a pretty fleshed out world so far. I mean, it's not like to the minor details, but a pretty fleshed out world. This book was 170 something pages long.
It's so
You
short.
know, it's so short, and it's just really, really well done. We've talked about this in other podcasts of like which authors to look for a masterclass in world building. This is a very small scale world, but it's a very rich.
It feels
and full.
feels lived in.
Yeah, and it's done in very little very few words, I should say.
Maybe we can talk about this more with subsequent books. We've got 3 more discussions to go. We'll be looking for things to talk about, so that's fine. But the economy on display in these books is really wondrous. What he's able to pack into 180 pages. Ryan, you look like you have one final thought.
Completely tangential, has nothing to do with...
Wait, whoa. If it's a tangent, it doesn't belong here on this podcast.
And this will mainly be, I apologize to our audio listeners, but I just want to point out to our YouTube viewers, hopefully this is up from there, the maps that are in the front of all these books. You can find them.
Yeah.
They're fun. They map the path that our characters take. That's something that usually isn't the case because you've got too many characters to try and map everything out there.
Right.
But one of my favorite things is going back, you look at the first one, and then you look at this one. They've progressed in time, and so you see over here the ruins of Spiral Castle, and they've just taken the icon and kind of broken it up in the map.
Nice.
Just a little side thing. If when an author and a publisher decides to add little elements like that, they're worth usually looking at for a few minutes.
Just to appreciate. It's like when my grandpa used to take me to the movies, and he'd say, "No, you're going to sit down through these credits because these people worked hard on this movie." Okay, all right. Yeah, sounds like about the same thing. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think it's a very charming map, and I don't mind that it tells you where you're going to go, because who cares? You have no context if you've never read the book. So, all right. Thus concludes our discussion of Lloyd Alexander's The Black Cauldron. No, we're not discussing the movie because Ryan's the only one that's seen it, and I don't care, and I'll never see it. I just don't care. I love this book too much, and I'm not going to go watch the movie.
There's an incredible story about a ride in Tokyo Disney that is all based on the Black Cauldron that had the Horn King and terrified children for years before it was closed. Well, not even for years, but before it was closed down from being too terrifying.
I think we just got that story.
I mean, in hindsight, the decision to kill the children and revive them with the Black Cauldron was maybe not the best ride experience.
I think that was about the time they made some chairman changes.
Yes, exactly.
So. Okay, all right. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Again, go to thelegendarium.com. You can join the Discord discussion. You can go to Patreon from there. There is even if you prefer not to sign up for an ongoing Patreon thing, there's a link to our PayPal. So if you're like, hey, that was worth $10, then first of all, you're crazy. And second of all, there's a button for that. So yeah, you can find that all at thelegendarium.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with the 3rd book, The Castle of Lear, which is Princess Eilonwy's book. So Kyle, I think you're going to enjoy that one if you liked getting a little bit more of her character in this. So we will see you then. Thanks for watching, listening, liking, subscribing, and we'll see you guys next time.